The emergency lights bathed the Galactic Council chamber in harsh red. Representatives from 200 civilizations sat in their designated seats, their various forms creating shadows that danced across the curved walls. The silence was heavy with fear. Ambassador Thakal of the Zorvian Collective stood at the central podium. His 4 eyes blinked in sequence as he pulled up the latest reports on the holographic display. The images showed burning worlds and shattered stations. More than 30 systems had fallen in less than 2 months. The Velcrin swarm continues its advance, Thakal announced, his translator converting his clicks and whistles into galactic standard. They have conquered the Pelion system, the Dravis colonies, and yesterday the mining worlds of Sector 7. Their pattern remains unchanged. A murmur rippled through the chamber. Everyone knew the pattern. The Velcrin were raiders, but they were not mindless. They were efficient. Brutal, but efficient. Counselor Vexana, whose species resembled floating jellyfish with crystalline cores, pulsed with an anxious yellow light. They offer surrender terms before each attack, correct? Perhaps we can establish diplomatic channels, negotiate a tribute system that satisfies them. Thakal's mandibles clicked in what his species considered a grimace. The terms are always the same. Surrender within 24 hours. Provide half of all resources, technology, and ships. Any resistance results in complete destruction. Those who surrender become vassal states forced to supply the Velcrin war machine. But they allow survivors, another counselor pointed out. That is more mercy than we have seen from other conquering species. Mercy? The voice came from the human section of the chamber. Ambassador Chen, representing Earth and its colonies, stood slowly. She was a small woman by human standards, barely reaching 5.5 feet with gray streaking through her black hair. But when she spoke, the chamber listened. Is that what we are calling it now, mercy? Thakal gestured for her to approach the podium. Ambassador Chen walked down the steps with measured pace, her simple gray suit contrasting with the elaborate robes and biological displays of other species. She reached the center and looked up at the tiered seats surrounding her. The Velcrin have destroyed 17 civilizations who refuse to surrender, Chen said, her voice calm but carrying an edge. They have enslaved 43 others. They use captured populations as forced labor in their weapons factories. They separate families, execute intellectuals who might inspire resistance, and indoctrinate children into their military culture. But yes, they let people live, barely. Ambassador Chen, Vexana pulsed a soothing blue. We understand your species has a complicated history with conflict. But surely you see that negotiation is preferable to war. The Velcrin have not yet entered human space. If we establish dialogue now, they will enter human space, Chen interrupted. Their trajectory shows they are moving toward our outer colonies. They will reach New Terra within 2 weeks. The chamber erupted in overlapping voices. Species that could speak shouted. Those that communicated through light or scent or electromagnetic pulses added to the chaos. Thakal had to activate the order bell 3 times before silence returned. Then we must act quickly, Thakal said. We should send a diplomatic envoy to the Velcrin. Offer mediation. Perhaps establish a buffer zone between their territory and human space. Pay tribute on humanity's behalf if necessary. Chen's expression did not change, but something in her eyes made Thakal's instincts scream danger. It was the look of a predator deciding whether to pounce or walk away. No, Chen said simply. Ambassador, please be reasonable. I am being perfectly reasonable, Chen replied. I am telling you what will happen. The Velcrin will arrive at New Terra. They will issue their demands. And when they inevitably harm our civilians, there will be no negotiation, no mediation, no tribute. There will only be response. An older counselor, whose species had been part of the galaxy's political structure for thousands of years, made a gesture of dismissal. Ambassador, your species joined this council only 2 centuries ago. You do not yet understand how galactic politics work. Everything is negotiable. Every conflict has a solution that does not require total war. Chen turned to face the elder directly. Counselor, my species has been at war with itself for most of our recorded history. We have made every mistake you can imagine. We have been conquerors and conquered. We have been monsters and victims. And through all of that blood and pain, we learned something that your peaceful species never had to learn. She paused, letting the silence build. We learned that there are certain lines that once crossed cannot be uncrossed. There are certain acts that remove the possibility of negotiation. And one of those acts is the deliberate murder of civilians as a negotiation tactic. Thakal felt a chill run through his exoskeleton. There was an old warning in the Galactic archives, something from humanity's first contact era. He had dismissed it as primitive posturing, but now, "You would doom your own colony?" Vexana asked, genuine confusion in her bioluminescent display. "You would let New Terra burn rather than negotiate." "We will not let New Terra burn," Chen said quietly. "We will defend it. And if the Velcrin harm our people, we will ensure they never harm anyone again." "This is madness," another counselor shouted. "You speak of extermination. I speak of consequence," Chen corrected. "The Velcrin have operated with impunity, because every species they encounter chooses survival over justice. They kill a few thousand and millions surrender. It is mathematics to them, a cost-benefit analysis. They have never faced a species that considered the murder of innocents to be an unforgivable act, rather than an opening negotiation position." She looked around the chamber, meeting as many eyes and sensors and perception organs as she could. "You asked me to be reasonable. I am. I am reasonably certain the Velcrin will attack New Terra. I am reasonably certain they will kill civilians to make their point. And I'm reasonably certain that when they do, humanity will respond with absolute force, not because we are cruel, not because we want war, but because we have learned that evil which interprets mercy as weakness will continue to do evil until it is stopped." Chen turned back to Thakal. "I recommend you prepare your historians, Ambassador. They will want to document what happens next. And I recommend you warn any species considering the Velcrin's methods that humanity's response will serve as a permanent lesson in galactic law." She walked back to her seat. The chamber remained silent for a long moment. Thakal finally spoke, his voice quieter than before. "We will convene a subcommittee to discuss diplomatic options." "You do that," Chen said from her seat. "We will prepare for war." 3 days later, the long-range sensors detected the Velcrin fleet. 47 warships, each the size of a small moon, dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the New Terra system. They moved in perfect formation, blocking all escape routes. The message came within an hour, broadcast on all frequencies. "People of New Terra, we are the Velcrin swarm. You have 24 hours to surrender all military assets and transfer governance to our commanders. You will provide half of all resources and technology. You will integrate your population into our empire. Resistance will result in extinction. This is your only warning." On New Terra, Colony Administrator James Reeves sat in his office looking at the planet below through his window. 15 million people, families, children. His own grandchildren were in the schools down there. He opened a secure channel to Earth. "This is New Terra. The Velcrin have arrived. Requesting evacuation support and military assistance," the response came quickly. "Acknowledged, New Terra. Evacuation ships are en route. Fleet mobilization has begun. Hold position. Protect civilians. Earth stands with you." Reeves nodded and cut the channel. He looked at his assistant. "Begin evacuation protocols. Priority to children, elderly, and medical cases. Get as many people as possible to the underground shelters." 23 hours and 47 minutes later, the Velcrin sent a second message. "Your time expires in 13 minutes. We detect defensive preparations. This is unwise. We will provide a demonstration of our sincerity." The Velcrin flagship fired a single shot. The farming settlement of Green Valley, population 3,000, ceased to exist. One moment it was there. Fields of wheat and small houses and a school where children were learning their multiplication tables. The next moment it was a crater of molten glass. The Velcrin commander's next message was brief. 12 hours. Choose wisely. The footage played across every human network simultaneously. 3,000 people. Gone. The Velcrin had made sure the satellites captured every moment. They had made sure everyone could see the flash of light, the mushroom cloud, the crater where a community had stood. In the Galactic Council chambers, the emergency session had been called within minutes. Ambassador Thakal stood at the podium, his 4 eyes showing visible distress. "This is a tragedy, but we must act rationally. The Velcrin have given New Terra 12 more hours. We can still negotiate." "No." Ambassador Chen's voice cut through the chamber like a blade. She stood in the human section, her face pale but composed. "No negotiation. No tribute. No compromise. Vexana pulsed an urgent yellow. Ambassador, 3,000 of your people are dead. 3,000. You must see that further resistance will only increase the casualties. Let us pay the tribute. Let us save the remaining 15 million. If we pay, if we negotiate, if we treat the murder of 3,000 people as an acceptable opening to diplomacy, then we teach the Velcrin and every other species watching that killing human civilians works, that it is a viable tactic, that it brings us to the table. Chen walked down to the central floor, her footsteps echoing in the tense silence. How many more will die if we teach that lesson? How many other colonies will face the same threat, knowing that terror is effective, but the alternative is war? Another counselor protested. Total war. The Velcrin fleet is massive. Your losses will be catastrophic. Yes, Chen agreed quietly. They will be. Human beings will die defending New Terra. Many of them. But they will die defending a principle that the rest of you seem to have forgotten. They will die proving that there are some acts so evil, so unforgivable that they remove the possibility of peaceful resolution. The Khal tried a different approach. Ambassador, I understand your anger. But your government, surely your leaders on Earth will see reason. They will not sacrifice 15 million people for pride. Chen's laugh was bitter. Pride? You think this is about pride? She pulled up her communication device and projected a message on the central display. It was from Earth's High Command. The message had only 3 words. No more talking. That, Chen said, is from the Secretary General, the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And every planetary governor in human space, unanimous, no negotiation, no tribute, no surrender. She pulled up another display. Fleet movements, dozens of human ships from every colony, every outpost, every military station, all moving toward New Terra. This began the moment the Velcrin killed those 3,000 people. This is not a decision being made. This is a decision that was already made centuries ago, written in human policy and law and history. A counselor whose species communicated through complex scent patterns released a mixture that the translators interpreted as confusion. But you are not even attempting to communicate with them. We have intercepted your military channels. There are no demands, no ultimatums, only coordinates and tactical data. Correct, Chen confirmed. Because there is nothing to say. The Velcrin demonstrated what they are. Now we will demonstrate what we are. In orbit around New Terra, Colony Administrator Reeves coordinated the evacuation efforts. The massive transport ships from Earth had arrived, each capable of carrying 50,000 people. But there was not enough time, not enough ships, not nearly enough of anything. His communication officer called out. Sir, the Velcrin are transmitting again. The Velcrin commander's face appeared on screen. He was a large creature, vaguely reptilian, with multiple rows of teeth designed for tearing flesh. His translator made his voice sound amused. Administrator Reeves, your time is nearly expired. We have been generous with our extension, but we detect ships entering your system. Military ships. This is extremely unwise. Reeves stared at the screen. You murdered 3,000 of my people. Men, women, children. You vaporized them to make a point. A necessary demonstration, the Velcrin commander replied. All species require such demonstrations. It is how negotiation works. Now you understand we are serious. Now you will surrender, and we will not need to provide further demonstrations. You misunderstand, Reeves said slowly. You did not open a negotiation. You ended one. Those ships entering the system? They are not here to talk. The Velcrin commander's translator conveyed his confusion. Then what purpose do they serve? Consequence, Reeves said and cut the transmission. The first human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel exactly 12 light seconds from the Velcrin formation. 23 warships smaller than the Velcrin vessels but moving with precise coordination. They did not slow down. They did not broadcast demands. They simply transmitted a single message on the Velcrin frequency, for the 3,000. Then they opened fire. The Velcrin commander was genuinely shocked. No species had attacked them so quickly. No species had refused negotiation at this stage. There was always posturing, always back-and-forth communication, always attempts at diplomacy. But the human ships came in firing, their weapons already locked on target, their tactics suggesting they had planned this exact scenario. Return fire, the commander ordered. Destroy them! They have made their choice. The Velcrin ships were powerful. Their weapons carved through 3 human vessels in the opening minutes. But the humans did not retreat. They did not even slow down. They flew their damaged ships directly at Velcrin vessels, using themselves as shields for the ships behind them, trading their lives for tactical advantage. In the Galactic Council, the observers watched in horror as the battle unfolded. The humans were outmatched. The math was simple. They would lose. But they kept fighting. Ambassador Chen stood before the council, her face illuminated by the displays showing the battle. "You asked why we will not negotiate. Watch, this is why." A counselor made a sound of distress. "They are dying. Your ships are being destroyed. Yes, they are dying to protect 15 million civilians. They are dying to prove that humanity does not calculate acceptable losses when it comes to murdered children. They are dying to send a message that will echo across this galaxy for generations." Another wave of human ships arrived. Then another. They kept coming from different vectors, different systems, all converging on New Terra. The Velcrin had superior numbers in the immediate battle, but the humans were bringing everything they had. The Velcrin commander finally understood. This was not a defense. This was a trap. New Terra was not the target. New Terra was the bait. The humans had used their own colony, their own 15 million people, as an anchor point to pin the Velcrin fleet in one location. He tried to open a communication channel to Earth, to any human authority. "We can discuss terms. We can withdraw from this system. There is no need for further bloodshed." No response. The human ships continued their attack with mathematical precision. They were not fighting with rage. They were fighting with cold calculation, trading casualties for strategic position, accepting losses that would make any other species surrender. The commander tried again. "We release all claims on human space. We will not approach your colonies again. We offer reparations." Still no response. It was as if the humans could not hear him, or worse, as if they were hearing him perfectly and simply did not care. A junior Velcrin officer spoke up, his voice shaking. "Commander, our losses are mounting. We should retreat. We should return to home space and regroup." The commander made the decision. "All ships prepare for faster-than-light jump. We withdraw." But as the Velcrin fleet began to disengage, more human ships arrived. And these were not escorts or frigates. These were the heavy capital ships, the kind that took years to build, representing a massive portion of humanity's military capacity. They positioned themselves precisely to cut off the Velcrin retreat routes. On the Velcrin flagship, a sensor officer made a sound of alarm. "Commander, I am detecting faster-than-light signatures. Multiple fleets approaching from various vectors. At least 200 human vessels." 200? The commander felt something he had not felt in decades of conquest. Fear. "That is impossible. That would be their entire navy." "Yes, Commander." Ambassador Chen spoke to the Galactic Council, her voice steady despite the tears running down her face. "You see those ships? Every one of them carries people who know they might not return. Every captain has made peace with dying. Every crew member has written letters to their families. But they all volunteered. Because they believe, as I believe, as humanity believes, that some evils cannot be negotiated with. Some evils must simply be stopped." She wiped her eyes and straightened her shoulders. "The Velcrin think this is about one colony. They do not understand. This is about every colony, every child, every innocent person in every system humanity will ever settle. We are teaching a lesson today. We are showing the galaxy what happens when you make terror your diplomacy." The battle raged for 6 more hours. The humans took devastating casualties. 12 capital ships destroyed, 43 escorts lost. Thousands of lives ended in the cold vacuum of space. But when the fighting paused, when the immediate combat ceased, the Velcrin fleet was surrounded, battered, and trapped. And behind them, following the trajectory to their home systems, came more human fleets, not to defend, not to negotiate, just to follow them home. The Velcrin commander finally received a response to his communique. The evacuation of New Terra continued even as the battle raged in orbit. Transport ships moved through the debris fields, their hulls marked with scoring from near misses. Parents clutched children. The elderly moved as quickly as their bodies allowed. Everyone knew they were alive because people they would never meet were dying above them. In the underground command center, Administrator Reeves watched the tactical displays. The human fleet had formed a defensive sphere around the planet, using their ships as a shield. Every time a Velcrin vessel tried to target the surface, human ships intercepted, placing themselves in the line of fire. He had already watched 17 captains make that choice. 17 ships, with crews numbering in the hundreds, simply positioning themselves to die so that civilians could live. "Sir," his tactical officer said quietly, "the Velcrin are attempting a breakthrough on the western vector, 3 of their heavy cruisers." Reeves watched as human destroyers moved to intercept. They were smaller, faster, but desperately outgunned. The lead destroyer took a direct hit that split it in half. The explosion was visible even from the surface, a brief star blooming in the night sky. But the other 2 destroyers pressed forward, their weapons carving into the Velcrin cruiser's shields. "Why do they fight like this?" the tactical officer asked. "They have to know they cannot win individual engagements." "They are not trying to win individual engagements," Reeves replied. "They are trying to buy time. Every minute they hold is another 1,000 people evacuated. Every hour they fight is another transport ship that reaches safety. They are not calculating victory. They are calculating how many lives they can save with their sacrifice." In the Galactic Council chamber, Ambassador Chen stood before a gathering that had grown to include observers from nearly every spacefaring species. The battle was being broadcast across the galaxy. Everyone was watching. Counselor Thakal spoke, his voice subdued. "Ambassador, your casualties are approaching 10,000. This is madness. Even if you win this battle, the cost is acceptable," Chen interrupted. "Do you know what is not acceptable? Teaching the galaxy that killing 3,000 people is a viable opening to negotiation. That murdering children brings humanity to the table. That terror works." She pulled up historical data, projecting it for all to see. "This is Earth, 500 years ago. My species was divided. We fought wars over territory, resources, religion, ideas. We tried every possible approach to conflict. We tried appeasement with aggressors. We tried negotiating with those who used terror tactics. Do you know what we learned?" The chamber was silent. "We learned that when you negotiate with those who deliberately target innocents, you do not get peace. You get a temporary pause before the next atrocity, because they learn that killing civilians brings them to the negotiating table. So they keep doing it. And more people die again and again because the cost of stopping them seems too high." Chen's voice hardened. "We also learned the opposite lesson when we established a policy of no negotiation with terror, when we made it clear that certain acts would result in absolute response. The number of those acts decreased, not because humans are naturally good at deterrence, but because we were willing to pay the cost of proving we meant it. An observer from a peaceful species that had never known war made a gesture of incomprehension. But surely all life is precious. Surely any negotiation is preferable to war." "All life is precious," Chen agreed. "That is exactly why we fight. Because the Velcrin have made it clear that they do not value life. They value power. They value submission. They calculate casualties as negotiation tactics. If we negotiate now, we teach them and everyone watching that their calculation works. And then how many more colonies face the same threat? How many more green valleys burn because we were too civilized to do what was necessary?" The battle data updated on the displays. Another human carrier destroyed. But the Velcrin were starting to fall back, regrouping, trying to find a vector that was not blocked by human ships willing to die. Ambassador Vexana pulsed a deep blue, the color of profound sadness in her species. "I begin to understand. You are not fighting just for New Terra. You are fighting for every future human colony, every potential victim." "Closer," Chen said. "We are fighting for every colony, human or otherwise. Because if the Velcrin succeed, if their tactics work, they will use them everywhere, on your colonies, on everyone's colonies. We are not just defending ourselves. We are defending the principle that civilians are not acceptable targets for terror." High Admiral Sarah Kamathi commanded the human fleet from her flagship, the UHSS Indomitable. Her face was weathered, her hair completely gray, and her eyes held the exhaustion of someone who had been fighting for 3 days straight, with only brief moments of sleep. She watched the tactical displays, and made calculations that would haunt her for the rest of her life. "Status of the Jefferson?" she asked. "Critical damage, life support failing. Captain Morrison requests permission to ram the Velcrin dreadnought." Kimathi closed her eyes briefly. Morrison had 2 children back on Mars. She knew this because she had attended their birthday party just 6 months ago. Granted. Tell him. Tell him Earth remembers. The Jefferson, engines failing and hull breached in 40 places, turned toward the massive Velcrin dreadnought. Its captain transmitted a final message. "For Green Valley, for the 3,000, for all the ones who cannot fight back." The collision destroyed both ships, but it opened a gap in the Velcrin formation, and human fighters poured through, targeting the command vessels beyond. "Admiral," her tactical officer reported. "We have confirmed 14 more human fleets have entered the system, and Admiral Chen's battle group is in pursuit of the Velcrin retreat vector." "Admiral Chen?" Kimathi asked. "Yes, ma'am. Your daughter." Kimathi felt her chest tighten. Her daughter commanded the 3rd Fleet. If she was following the Velcrin retreat, she was going to their home systems. "Does the Galactic Council know?" "Yes, ma'am. Ambassador Chen, your sister, just informed them. In the Galactic Council, the news hit like a shockwave. Not 1 fleet following the Velcrin home, not 2. 14 separate human fleets representing nearly every military vessel humanity possessed, all converging on Velcrin space." The Khal stood at his podium, his 4 eyes wide with horror. This is total war. This is extinction-level commitment. Ambassador Chen, your species is risking everything." "Yes," Chen confirmed, "because this is not about risk calculation. This is about demonstrating that certain lines cannot be crossed. The Velcrin need to understand. The galaxy needs to understand. Humanity needs to understand. When innocents die as a terror tactic, the response is not negotiation. It is not proportional. It is absolute." A counselor from a species that had submitted to the Velcrin 40 years ago spoke up, his voice shaking. "You speak of principle, of justice. But my people know the Velcrin. They are cruel beyond measure. They will make your people suffer. They will broadcast the suffering. They will hurt you in ways you cannot imagine." Chen turned to face him directly. "They already have. They killed 3,000 of our people. They vaporized children to make a point. There is no suffering they can inflict that would be worse than accepting that as a negotiation tactic. If we negotiate now, we tell them that killing works. And then they will kill again, and again. And every time we will have to decide, do we submit or do we fight? Better to fight now. Better to make it clear now. Better to pay the price now than to watch it happen over and over across the decades." The counselor shook his head. "You are condemning thousands of your people to death." "Those people volunteered," Chen replied quietly. "Every ship in those fleets is crewed by people who knew what they were signing up for, who understood that humanity's policy on terror means sometimes we have to back up our words with blood. They made peace with that. They accepted it, because they believed that some principles are worth dying for." She pulled up casualty reports. The numbers were staggering. 8,000 humans dead already, 12,000 wounded, and the main battle had not even begun. You ask why we accept these losses, why we do not negotiate. Let me tell you a story from Earth's history. 200 years ago, there was an organization that used terror tactics. They would bomb civilian targets, kill innocents, and then demand policy changes. For years, governments negotiated. They tried to address grievances. They tried to find compromise. And the terror continued because it worked. Chen paused, letting the weight of history settle on the chamber. Then one government said, "No more negotiation. Anyone who deliberately targets civilians forfeits all rights to negotiation. The response to terror will be complete, systematic dismantling of the organization responsible. Not negotiation, not compromise, just consequence." "What happened?" Vexana asked. "The terror attacks dropped by 70% within 5 years. Because the terrorists learned that killing civilians did not bring them to the table. It brought absolute response. The calculation changed. Terror stopped being a viable tactic. The displays updated again. The Velcrin were in full retreat now, desperately trying to reach faster-than-light speeds, but human ships pursued, preventing them from gathering the time needed to. The Velcrin home system had never known invasion. For 300 years, they had been the invaders, the conquerors, the terror that made civilizations submit. Their cities were built on the tribute of 43 enslaved species. Their military academies taught that fear was the ultimate weapon. Their children learned that mercy was weakness. Now, at the edge of their system, faster-than-light signatures bloomed like deadly flowers. One human fleet, then another, then 5 more, then 10. The numbers kept growing until the sensors could barely track them all. In the capital city, the Velcrin High Command watched the displays with growing dread. They had never imagined this, never planned for this. Every military doctrine they had developed assumed they would be the attackers, that other species would be on the defensive, scrambling to protect their worlds. How many? The Supreme Commander demanded. At least 170 ships, Supreme Commander. Possibly more. They are still arriving. 170? The Supreme Commander's claws scraped against his command throne. That is impossible. They would have left their own space completely undefended. Yes, Supreme Commander. The implication hung in the air like poison. Humanity had committed everything. Every ship. Every resource. They had left their own colonies vulnerable just to come here. It was tactical insanity. It was strategic suicide. It was terrifying in its absoluteness. Broadcast on all frequencies, the Supreme Commander ordered. Offer surrender terms. Full reparations. Release of all vassal states. Technology transfers. Anything they want. The message was sent. The humans did not respond. They simply continued their approach. Their formation perfect, their weapons powered but not yet firing. The silence was worse than any threat. In the Galactic Council chamber, the session had been ongoing for 3 days. Representatives slept in their chairs, too afraid to leave, too horrified to stop watching. The displays showed the human fleet surrounding the Velcrin homeworlds like a tightening noose. Ambassador Chen had not left the chamber either. She stood at the central podium, her face pale with exhaustion, her voice hoarse from speaking. But she did not waver. Counselor Thakal made one more attempt. Ambassador, please. They are trying to surrender. They are offering everything. You have won. You have made your point. The entire galaxy has seen what happens when humanity is pushed. Please call off your fleets. Show mercy. Mercy. Chen repeated the word slowly. You want us to show mercy to a species that has enslaved 43 civilizations, that has murdered millions, that just 3 days ago vaporized 3,000 of our people to make a point about their power. You want us to show them mercy? Yes, Vexana pulsed earnestly. Because you are better than they are. Because you can prove that humanity is not what the galaxy fears, that you are civilized, compassionate, capable of restraint. Chen laughed, and the sound was bitter. We are better than them. That is exactly why we will do what is necessary. Because being better does not mean being weak. Being civilized does not mean accepting atrocity. Being compassionate does not mean allowing evil to continue because stopping it is uncomfortable. She pulled up data files, projecting them across the chamber. These are the Velcrin's vassal states. 43 civilizations living in bondage, families separated, children indoctrinated, resources stripped, cultures destroyed. The Velcrin did this systematically over 3 centuries, and they would have continued if we had negotiated after Green Valley. They would have added humanity to this list and then continued on to the next species and the next and the next. But you can stop them without destruction, another counselor pleaded. You can occupy their worlds. You can establish oversight. You can reform them. With what forces? Chen asked. We have committed everything to this action. We do not have the resources to occupy and reform an empire that spans 43 systems. We do not have the troops to maintain peace across that territory. We do not have the time to re-educate 300 years of cultural conditioning. What we have is this moment right now, to ensure that the Velcrin never threaten anyone again. Admiral Kamathi's fleet took position over the first Velcrin world. It was a massive planet home to billions. Cities sprawled across continents. Orbital stations handled trade and commerce. It looked in many ways like any other civilized world, except that it was built on the suffering of enslaved populations. Admiral, her communications officer reported. The Velcrin are broadcasting from the surface. They are showing civilian populations. They are asking us to consider the innocent lives. Timothy felt a surge of anger so intense it took her breath away. They show us their civilians? They dare to show us their civilians as a shield? Where were our civilians when they fired on Green Valley? Where was their consideration for innocent lives? She took a deep breath, forcing herself to calm. Anger was not useful. Precision was useful. Open a channel to the surface. All frequencies. I want every Velcrin to hear this. When the channel opened, Admiral Kamathi spoke clearly and slowly, giving the translators time to convert her words into the Velcrin language. People of the Velcrin worlds, I am Admiral Sarah Kamathi of the United Human Space Force. 3 days ago, your military murdered 3,000 of my people as a demonstration of power. Men, women, and children vaporized to make a point. She paused, letting the words sink in. You are now experiencing what my people experienced. You are looking up at ships in your sky and wondering if you will die. You are afraid. You are desperate. You want us to see your civilians, your families, your children, and feel mercy. Another pause. The entire Velcrin world was listening. We do see them. We do feel mercy. That is why we are not doing to you what you did to us. We will not vaporize your cities. We will not kill your children. Because we are better than you. But make no mistake, that mercy comes with a price. Kimathi nodded to her tactical officer. Human Marines began boarding shuttles. The operation they had planned began to unfold. We are going to dismantle your military. Every warship. Every weapons facility. Every military academy. Every factory that produces weapons. All of it will be destroyed. Your capacity for interstellar aggression will be erased. On the Velcrin world below, panic spread through the military command. Without their fleet, without their weapons, they would be defenseless. Vulnerable. Any of the species they had enslaved could turn on them. You are afraid, Kamathi continued, her voice cold. Good, you should be afraid. You should understand what it feels like to be vulnerable, to know that others have power over you, to wonder if mercy will be shown. Your enslaved populations felt this for 300 years. Now you get to feel it, and maybe, just maybe, you will learn something from it. The human Marines landed on Velcrin military installations. There was sporadic resistance, but the Velcrin had built their empire on terror and overwhelming force. They had never developed the skills for desperate last stands. When faced with human troops who had trained for exactly this scenario, they broke quickly. In orbit, human engineers methodically destroyed Velcrin warships. Not with massive explosions, but with surgical precision. Engines dismantled. Weapons removed. Life support left intact. The ships would never fly again, but the crews would survive. The Galactic Council watched as humanity demonstrated exactly what they had promised. It was not revenge. It was not genocide. It was systematic dismantling of a military empire, conducted with ruthless efficiency but without unnecessary casualties. They are not killing civilians, the Khal observed, his translator carrying a note of surprise. They are specifically targeting only military assets. I told you, Ambassador Chen said quietly. We are not monsters. We do not kill for pleasure. We do not target innocents, but we will ensure that those who do target innocents can never do it again. On the surface of the Velcrin capital world, human Marines breached the Central Command facility. The Supreme Commander stood in his throne room, surrounded by his highest officers. They had weapons, but they did not raise them. They knew it was over. Captain James Foster, leading the Marine unit, approached with his weapon lowered but ready. Supreme Commander, by the authority of the United Human Space Force and on behalf of the 43 civilizations you have enslaved, I am placing you under arrest for war crimes, crimes against sentient beings, and the deliberate targeting of civilian populations. The Supreme Commander looked at the human captain with something like curiosity. You will execute me. No, Foster replied. We will not execute you. You will stand trial. Your victims will testify. Every species you enslaved, every population you terrorized, they will all get to speak. And then, whatever justice they decide, that is what you will face. Not human justice, not revenge, but accountability. Across the Velcrin territories, the pattern repeated. Military installations destroyed, weapon factories dismantled, ships disabled. But civilians left alive. The humans were thorough, methodical, and surprisingly restrained, given what had been done to them. In one Velcrin city, a group of civilians approached a human marine unit cautiously. An elder spoke through a translator. "Why do you not kill us? We expected, after what our military did, we expected destruction." The Marine sergeant, a woman named Rodriguez from New Terra who had lost cousins in Green Valley, looked at the Velcrin civilians for a long moment. "Because you did end 6 months after the dismantling of the Velcrin military empire, the Galactic Council reconvened in a specially constructed facility. This was not a normal session. This was history being written in real time. The trial chamber was massive, designed to hold representatives from every species that had suffered under Velcrin rule. 43 civilizations sent delegates. Some came in person. Others appeared via holographic projection. All came with stories of suffering, loss, and survival. The Velcrin leadership sat in a transparent containment field at the center of the chamber. The Supreme Commander and his highest officers, alive but stripped of all power, waiting to hear their fate. Human guards stood at attention around the chamber, but they were merely a formality. The real judgment would come from the victims. Ambassador Chen stood at the opening of the proceedings, her role reduced now to observer and enforcer. She watched as representative after representative came forward to testify. Some spoke with rage, some with quiet dignity, some could barely speak at all, their trauma still too fresh even after decades. A representative from the Korvathi people, enslaved for 70 years, showed footage of families being separated, children taken for military indoctrination, parents worked to death in resource extraction. He spoke for 3 hours, his voice never rising, simply stating facts. The weight of those facts filled the chamber like lead. A survivor from the Drexen civilization, which had resisted Velcrin conquest and been nearly wiped out, could only stand at the podium for 5 minutes before breaking down. "They killed 90% of us," she whispered. "They made examples. They wanted the galaxy to see what resistance cost. And it worked. Dozens of species surrendered because they saw what the Velcrin did to us. On and on it went. Days of testimony. Weeks of evidence. The complete documented history of 300 years of systematic oppression. The Velcrin leadership was forced to listen to every word, to see every image, to understand, finally, the true cost of their empire." When the testimony concluded, the delegates began their deliberations. They would decide the fate of the Velcrin leadership collectively. Humanity had promised to enforce whatever decision they made, but the decision itself belonged to the victims. In her quarters, Ambassador Chen met with her sister, Admiral Kimathi, and her niece, Admiral Chen of the Third Fleet. 3 generations of one family, all involved in the largest military action in human history. "The delegates are divided," Sarah Kimathi said quietly. "Some want execution, some want life imprisonment. A few argue for rehabilitation. What do you think will happen?" Her daughter asked. Chen considered the question carefully. "I think they will choose something that demonstrates they learned what we tried to teach. That justice is not revenge, that consequence is not the same as cruelty. And if they choose execution, then we enforce it," Chen replied simply. "We promised we would enforce whatever justice they decided. We cannot pick and choose based on our own sensibilities. That would make us no different than any other empire imposing our will on others." The deliberations took 2 weeks. Finally, the delegates reached a consensus. The chamber filled once more, every seat occupied, every eye on the verdict. The spokesperson for the Victims' Coalition was an elder from the Pelion system, one of the first civilizations the Velcrin had enslaved. She stood at the podium, her hands shaking slightly but her voice steady. "We have heard testimony from all affected parties. We have considered the crimes committed. We have debated the appropriate response." She paused, looking directly at the Velcrin leadership. "You took everything from us. Our freedom, our dignity, our loved ones. Many of us wanted you to feel the same pain, to suffer as we suffered, to lose as we lost." The chamber was silent, but we also heard testimony from humans, from Admiral Kimathi, who lost family in the attack on Green Valley, from Captain Foster, who lost his entire hometown, from thousands of human soldiers who risked everything to free us. And they all said the same thing: we do not become what we hate. We do not inflict suffering because suffering was inflicted on us. She took a breath. "Therefore, our decision is this. The Velcrin leadership will be imprisoned for life on a facility built specifically for this purpose. They will live, but they will live knowing their empire is over. They will spend every day watching as the civilizations they enslaved rebuild, thrive, and grow beyond what they ever allowed. They will witness the galaxy they tried to conquer prosper in peace, knowing they can never again be part of it. She looked up at the viewing galleries where representatives of the former vassal states sat. And perhaps in time, they will understand what they took from us. Perhaps they will develop the capacity for remorse. We do not know if they can, but we will give them the chance to try, because that is the difference between justice and revenge. The verdict was unanimous. The Velcrin leadership would live, but would spend their remaining years watching everything they built fall away. Their military was destroyed, their empire dismantled, their legacy reduced to a warning. In the weeks that followed, humanity began the slow process of rebuilding. The casualties from the war had been staggering. 14,000 dead, 23,000 wounded, entire families wiped out, colonies left vulnerable while the fleets were deployed. But they had known the cost going in and they had accepted it. Memorial services were held across human space. Names were read. Stories were told. Captain Morrison, who had rammed the Velcrin dreadnought, was posthumously awarded the highest honor Earth could give. His children, now teenagers, accepted the medal with quiet pride and visible grief. The Galactic Council held its own session, and the atmosphere was markedly different from 6 months ago. There was wariness now when representatives looked at the human delegation, but there was also respect. And perhaps more importantly, there was understanding. Ambassador Thakal approached Chen before the session began. I owe you an apology. I argued for negotiation. I called your position extreme. I did not understand. Chen looked at him steadily. You understand now? I do. I watched those testimonies. I heard what the Velcrin did repeatedly across centuries. And I realized, if we had negotiated after Green Valley, if we had paid tribute and called it peace, the Velcrin would have learned that terror works on humans too. They would have used it again, and eventually, on my people as well. He made a gesture of respect in his species' manner. You paid a terrible price to teach a lesson that needed teaching. The galaxy is safer for it, even if that is uncomfortable to admit. The council session began with a proposal from the human delegation. Ambassador Chen stood at the podium and pulled up a document that had been drafted carefully over the past months. We submit for consideration the new Terra doctrine, a set of principles that we believe should be adopted as galactic law. The document appeared on every delegate's display. The core principle was simple but absolute. Any species or organization that deliberately targets civilian populations as a military or political tactic forfeits all rights to negotiation. The response will be complete, systematic dismantling of their capacity for violence. This is not about human dominance, Chen explained. This is about establishing a clear line that no one should cross. You do not kill innocents and then expect diplomatic resolution. You do not use terror as a bargaining chip. You do not murder children and then offer to talk. Debate raged for hours. Some species argued it was too harsh. Others argued it was necessary. Some worried about how it would be enforced. Others pointed out that humanity had already demonstrated effective enforcement. Finally, Counselor Vexana spoke. I have watched humanity pay in blood for this principle. I have seen them commit everything they had to prove they meant it. And I have seen them maintain moral restraint even in the midst of total war, targeting only military assets, preserving civilian lives even of their enemies. If they are willing to bear that burden, to accept that cost, then I believe we should support them in establishing this standard. The vote was called. The new Terra doctrine passed with near unanimity. A few species abstained, uncomfortable with the absoluteness of the policy, but none voted against it, because everyone had seen the alternative. Everyone had watched 300 years of Velcrin atrocities go unchecked, because negotiation seemed preferable to war. The doctrine included provisions for enforcement. A joint task force would be established, with human ships serving alongside vessels from other species. Any violation of the doctrine would trigger immediate response. No warnings, no negotiation, just consequence. In the months and years that followed, the galaxy changed. Pirates who had once raided colonies reconsidered their tactics. Warlords who had used terror to control territory found themselves facing unified response. The few who tested the doctrine learned, as the Velcrin had learned, that humanity meant what it said. But humanity also kept its promise about not seeking dominance. When a mining dispute erupted between two species, humans stayed out of it. When border conflicts arose, humans encouraged diplomatic resolution. They only intervened when civilians became targets. When innocents were threatened,